Tonight's story takes us to a forgotten village where the fog never seems to leave the woods for long. The people of Aldermore have lived with an old warning for generations. Never follow the lantern. Never enter the forest after dark. And whatever happens, never answer if something calls your name from the fog. Most legends begin with a grain of truth. This one began with the dead. The Last Lantern. Jonathan Hale first saw the lantern on a night when the fog seemed determined to swallow the world. The road to Aldermore wound through miles of dark woodland, and by the time his carriage approached the village, the last traces of daylight had vanished behind a blanket of low clouds. The horse snorted nervously as the wheels rattled over the muddy road. Jonathan pulled his coat tighter around himself and peered through the carriage window. Nothing. Only fog. Dense gray fog drifting beneath black trees. The coachman driving him into the village had spoken little during the journey. He had spent most of the ride glancing uneasily into the woods. At last, the driver broke the silence. "You'll be staying long, Doctor?" "A few weeks, perhaps longer," Jonathan replied. The man nodded. "Then you'll hear about him soon enough." "Him?" The coachman hesitated. "The Lantern Man." Jonathan smiled. "A local ghost story?" The driver did not return the smile. "Not a story." He fell silent again. An hour later, they rolled into Aldermore. The village sat in a shallow valley surrounded by dark forest. Old stone cottages lined the narrow streets. Lamps glowed behind curtained windows, but very few people remained outdoors. In fact, as Jonathan stepped from the carriage, he noticed something peculiar. Everyone seemed to be hurrying home. Doors closed, curtains were drawn, bolts slid into place, as though the approaching night brought more than darkness. The village inn stood at the center of the square, a crooked building of dark timber and stone. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth. The innkeeper greeted Jonathan warmly and showed him to a table near the fire. Only 4 other people occupied the common room, all elderly, all silent. One of them sat alone in the corner, an old man with silver hair and deeply lined features. He watched Jonathan for several minutes before finally approaching. "You'll be the new doctor?" Jonathan nodded. "I am." The old man sat opposite him. "Richard Holloway." The name seemed fitting somehow, like something carved into an ancient gravestone. "I'm Jonathan Hale." Richard studied him. Then he said quietly, "If you see a lantern in the fog, keep walking." Jonathan chuckled. "Another warning about the Lantern Man?" Richard's face remained serious. "Do not follow him." "I don't intend to." "Good." The old man leaned closer. "And if he calls your name..." The fire crackled loudly behind them. Richard's eyes never left Jonathan's. "Do not answer," The room had grown strangely quiet. The other villagers were listening. Jonathan suddenly felt less amused. Has anyone actually seen this figure? Richard stared into the flames. Too many. The old man rose and returned to his seat. The conversation was over. Jonathan told himself it was merely village superstition, nothing more. Yet that night, as he lay awake in his room above the inn, sleep did not come easily, because sometime after midnight, he heard something outside. A distant bell, a single chime, then another, and another. Slow, as though someone was walking through the village carrying metal lantern hooks that gently struck against one another. The sound continued for several minutes, then stopped. The silence that followed felt even worse. Over the next week, Jonathan settled into village life. The people of Aldermore proved friendly enough. But whenever he mentioned the Lantern Man, conversation ended immediately. Faces darkened, subjects changed, doors closed. No one wished to discuss it, except Richard Holloway. The old man visited the doctor's office several times. Each visit revealed another fragment of the legend. Disappearances, missing travelers, hunters who wandered into the woods and never returned, children who claimed to see lantern lights moving among the trees, always during fog, always after sunset, always accompanied by the same description: a tall figure carrying an antique lantern. One evening, Jonathan asked the question that had been bothering him. Has anyone ever found the bodies? Richard looked uncomfortable. No. Then perhaps the missing people simply became lost. Richard stared at him. You think every one of them got lost? Jonathan shrugged. It seems more likely than ghosts. The old man's expression changed. You haven't seen him yet? Jonathan smiled. No. Richard stood. When you do, you'll understand. 3 nights later, the fog returned, thicker than before. Jonathan had spent the evening visiting a sick farmer on the edge of the village. The road home wound alongside the forest. No moon, no stars, only fog. The darkness seemed alive. The beam from his lantern illuminated barely 20 feet ahead. Jonathan walked alone, boots crunching softly upon gravel. Then he noticed another light, far ahead. A lantern. It glowed faintly among the trees. At first he assumed it belonged to another traveler. But the light was unusually high, nearly 7 feet above the ground. The figure holding it stood motionless, watching. Jonathan stopped walking. The lantern remained still. The surrounding woods were utterly silent. Then the figure took 1 step forward. The lantern swayed gently. Jonathan's stomach tightened. The shape appeared wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin. Like a man stretched unnaturally by the darkness. A voice emerged from the fog. Soft, distant, yet perfectly clear.
Jonathan Hale.
Every muscle in his body froze. The voice had spoken directly beside his ear, yet the figure remained far away. The lantern flickered. The figure turned and began walking into the forest. Jonathan stood motionless, his heart hammered. He remembered Richard's warning. Do not follow him. For several seconds he obeyed. Then curiosity overcame fear. He stepped off the road and followed. The forest swallowed him immediately. Fog drifted beneath the trees like pale smoke. The lantern remained visible ahead, always just out of reach. Jonathan followed it deeper and deeper. Soon he realized something disturbing. He could no longer hear the village. No wind, no animals, no insects, nothing. The entire forest felt dead. Then he saw the first figure, a woman standing beside a tree, motionless. Her clothing appeared decades out of date. Her face was hidden beneath a veil. Jonathan stopped. The woman did not move. The lantern continued onward. Jonathan looked away for only a moment. When he looked back, she was gone. His pulse quickened. Soon more figures appeared. A child, an older man, a young mother carrying an infant, all standing silently among the trees, watching him pass. None moved, none spoke, yet somehow Jonathan knew they were following. Not physically, but with their eyes, always watching, always waiting. Then the trees ended, and Crow's Reach emerged from the fog. Jonathan stared in disbelief. Ruined cottages, collapsed roofs, broken stone walls, an entire settlement hidden within the forest, forgotten, abandoned, dead. The lantern floated toward the center of the ruins. There stood an ancient church, its bell tower partially collapsed, its windows black. The lantern man waited before the doorway. For the first time, Jonathan saw him clearly, or almost clearly. His face remained hidden within shadows. Yet Jonathan sensed eyes staring from the darkness beneath the hood. Ancient eyes. Empty eyes. The lantern illuminated pale fingers clutching the iron handle. The skin looked almost skeletal. Dead. The figure spoke.
You came.
Jonathan swallowed. Who are you? The answer came immediately.
Henry Locke.
The name echoed strangely through the ruins. Jonathan felt cold. Not physically cold, something worse. A coldness inside his bones. The movement appeared throughout Crow's Reach. Figures emerged from every ruined building. Dozens, hundreds. Their pale faces stared toward him. Many appeared horribly thin. Some looked frozen. Others bore dark marks upon their skin. All silent. All dead. Jonathan took a step backward. The crowd took one step forward. The sound was horrifying. Henry raised the lantern. The ghosts froze.
You wish to know the truth.
The air changed. The ruins vanished. Jonathan suddenly stood in a living settlement. Crow's Reach, years earlier. Snow covered everything. People huddled inside homes. Children cried. A blizzard raged. Jonathan watched invisible scenes unfold around him. Travelers arrived from the north, cold, hungry, desperate. They begged for shelter. The people of Aldermore turned them away, afraid they would consume the village's dwindling food stores. The travelers fled into the storm. Crow's Reach became their refuge and their tomb. Jonathan witnessed starvation, madness, death. One by one, they perished. The final survivor was Henry Locke, alone, frozen, abandoned, left to die in darkness. The vision ended. The ghosts remained, hundreds of them, surrounding Jonathan. The doctor struggled to breathe. "What do you want from me?" Henry's voice emerged from the shadows.
To remember.
Jonathan nodded. "I will." The lantern dimmed. For a moment he thought the nightmare had ended. Then the ghosts began moving again, slowly, toward him. Hundreds of dead faces, hundreds of empty eyes. The air filled with whispers, names, dozens of names, hundreds of names, whispered from every direction. Louder, louder, louder. Jonathan covered his ears. The voices continued. Then he realized something terrifying. They were no longer speaking their names. They were speaking his.
Jonathan.
The dead surged forward. Henry raised the lantern. Everything went dark. Jonathan awoke at dawn on the road outside Aldermore, alone, his clothes soaked with dew, the forest silent behind him. He returned to the village and spent months uncovering the truth. Old records, forgotten documents, church archives. Everything Richard Holloway had feared proved real. Crow's Reach had existed. The tragedy had happened. And Henry Locke had died there more than a century earlier. Jonathan published every name he could find, every victim, every forgotten traveler. Yet even after the truth became known, his nightmares continued. Night after night he dreamed of Crow's Reach. Night after night he heard voices whispering his name. Years passed. The sightings stopped. No one spoke of the Lantern Man anymore. People believed the haunting had ended. Jonathan almost believed it himself. Almost. Until one autumn evening, many years later. Fog covered the forest once more. Jonathan stood alone upon the old road, watching, waiting. Nothing appeared. He began to smile. Perhaps it truly was over. Then, a light appeared among the trees. A lantern, far away, burning softly in the darkness. Jonathan's smile vanished. A tall figure stepped from the fog. The lantern swayed gently. The shape looked familiar. Terribly familiar. And then Jonathan realized why. The figure was wearing his coat. The same coat he had worn on the night he followed Henry Locke into the woods. A cold voice drifted from the fog. A voice that sounded exactly like his own.
Jonathan Hale.
The lantern flickered. The figure smiled. And somewhere deep within Crow's Reach, hundreds of unseen voices answered at once. Still here, are you? Braver than most. Or maybe just curious what creeps through the night when the candles burn low? If you enjoyed tonight's tale, please like, share, and subscribe before something else does it for you, and help keep this lantern burning. Thank you for listening. See you around when it's time for short ghost stories, long after midnight.